soaring food prices are also contributing to the squeeze on family budgets. But today, Russia's foreign minister denied the war in Ukraine was the cause, even though there's been a collapse in essential Ukrainian exports of grain. Sergei Lavrov made his comments in Turkey, where talks are ongoing to find agreement on how to unblock shipments from Ukraine. The World Trade Organization said that grain shortages as a result of the war will lead to a disastrous situation worldwide. Our global trade correspondent Darshini David reports.
Ukraine's crops can usually feed 400 million mouths, but Russia stands accused of turning that breadbasket into a stealth missile. 90% of grain typically leaves by ship, but most is stuck in fields or silos, as blockades at ports slow exports to a trickle.
My friend, how are you?
The Russian foreign minister was in Turkey to discuss how grain corridors, a safe passage for ships, could be created, but was making no commitments nor accepting any responsibility.
To solve this problem, the only thing needed is for the Ukrainians to let vessels out of their ports, either by clearing mines or by marking out safe corridors. Nothing more is required.
Ukraine is one of the world's largest exporters of cereal crops and oils. Before the war, 12% of global wheat exports came from Ukraine, almost half of sunflower oil, and it provided around 18% of maize exports. But with most of these being transported by sea, the amount being exported has slumped. And that means some countries, chiefly in Africa and the Middle East, will be hit hard. Egypt has been receiving a quarter of its wheat from Ukraine, Libya almost half, and Lebanon more than 60%. And taking a chunk out of the world's supply means prices have soared since the invasion, affecting every corner of the globe. Can a deal to get exports moving be struck? The World Trade Organization is one of those trying to solve this crisis.
Having 20 to 25 million tons of grain sitting both in Ukrainian ports and in granaries, warehouses, it's really sad when we see prices rising so high.
At the moment, there is no progress. What if there is no agreement? What are your concerns?
If we are not able to evacuate the grains in Ukraine now, and then they have a harvest coming up in July with a similar quantity that will go to waste, then you can see that this will work its way through for the next year or two, and that will be really, really disastrous.
The clock is ticking. 49 million people are already on the brink of famine. A more prolonged humanitarian crisis could be looming. Darshini David, BBC News.
Business Day, I'm Vashan Brown. The head of the World Trade Organization, WTO, has said a food crisis kicked off by the Ukraine war could last for years if there's no intervention. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala told the BBC that African countries could be hit especially hard by wheat and fertilizer shortages. Millions of tons of grain are sitting in warehouses and Ukrainian ports unable to be exported due to the war. Ukraine is a major global exporter of wheat, contributing up to 9% of the global market. It also accounts for a massive 42% chunk of the global sunflower oil market and 16% of the world's maize. Because of gridlock due to a Russian blockade of Black Sea ports, wheat shipments remain stuck in Ukraine while global grain prices surge. And the White House expects the next round of economic data to show elevated inflation. U.S. Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre made the disclosure today. Now, she said figures to be released at the end of this week are likely to show more evidence of high inflation. Ms. Jean-Pierre said the war in Ukraine is also expected to have some effects on core inflation. And oil.
Helping put food on the table. Community kitchens like this are starting up around Sri Lanka as people struggle with its worst economic crisis in more than 70 years. Food inflation has hit nearly 60%, and many people are finding it difficult to cope.
Most of these community who are coming today or been coming are surviving with 2 meals. So we are giving them the responsibility of surviving for 1 meal, and we are saying, right, we will support you with 1 meal, but a good healthy meal.
Few now get to eat this well.
It's very difficult. We rarely get food like this. Only my husband is working, but what he earns for a day is not enough to feed the 3 of us now.
Tax cuts 3 years ago slashed government revenue by more than $2 billion. The tourism industry was then damaged by the Easter bombings and the pandemic. Now there is no money to import fuel, medicine, cooking gas or food.
Right now, actually, our main focuses are on food banks, on community kitchens, and again, long to medium term community gardens and home gardens, because we can give rations, but it's very short term.
The government is appealing for help.
We urgently require the assistance of our friends in the international community to ensure that our immediate needs in terms of the importation of essential medicines, food supply, and fuel are met.
India and China have sent food and medicine in recent days. The opposition says the government has weakened the economy through populist policies and mismanagement. A nationwide campaign dubbed Gota Go Home has been running for 2 months, calling on the president to resign. The government is seeking a loan package from the International Monetary Fund or IMF. Critics say it'll take too long, even if agreed, and people need action now.
Tens of thousands of Sri Lankans are going hungry amid the country's worst economic crisis in decades. Community kitchens like this can only feed a fraction of them. Minna Fernandez, Al Jazeera, Colombo.
A raging war between Ukraine and Russia have raised fears of a global food crisis, owing to the shortage in supply of grains, especially wheat. As Russia and Ukraine together produce 1/3 of the global wheat. But Russian President Vladimir Putin says that Moscow is not responsible for problems in the food market. Breaking his silence for the first time on the accusations leveled by other nations, Putin said that the Western nations are to be blamed for the problems, as they are facing trouble due to their poorly drafted policies, and Russia is being made a scapegoat.
Увеличились цены на удобрения, потому что часть этих удобрений производится в том числе за счет природного газа. Все взаимосвязано между собой. Как только поползли цены на удобрения, многие предприятия, в том числе в европейских странах, они стали нерентабельными, начали закрываться вообще. И объем удобрений на мировом рынке резко упал. А цены, соответственно, выросли. Причем цены выросли драматично, можно сказать. Совершенно неожидаемо для многих европейских политиков. Но мы об этом предупреждали. И это вообще никак не связано ни с какой военной операцией России на Донбассе. Не имеет к этому вообще никакого отношения. Вот одно цепляется за другое. И Россия здесь совершенно ни при чем. Наши партнеры сами наделали кучу ошибок, а теперь ищут на кого бы свалить. И, конечно, в этом смысле самым удобным кандидатом.
Now, while speaking about wheat exports from Ukraine, the Russian president said that Moscow has not halted any exports. He said that the Ukrainian naval mines were the biggest roadblock for Ukrainian vessels.
Первый, пожалуйста, можно вывозить через порты, которые находятся под контролем Украины. Ну, прежде всего, это Черноморского бассейна, Одесса и близлежащие порты. Не мы же заминировали подходы к порту, это Украина заминировала. Я уже много раз говорил всем нашим коллегам, ну пусть они разминируют, и, пожалуйста, пускай корабли с зерном, груженные зерном, выходят из портов. Мы гарантируем их мирный проход без всяких проблем.
Putin further suggested that the wheat could be exported from the ports of Belarus as well. But for that, the European Union will have to lift sanctions, as the country currently faces sanctions over human rights violations and for backing Kremlin in Ukraine's invasion.
Ну и, наконец, самое простое – это вывоз через территорию Беларуси. Самое легкое и самое дешевое, потому что оттуда сразу в порты Прибалтики, и в Балтийское море и дальше в любую точку планеты. Но для этого нужно снимать санкции с Беларуси.
Now, this comes after Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko said that Minsk was ready to allow the transit of Ukraine's grain, if in return it was allowed to ship Belarusian goods from those ports. Putin then warned, saying that the situation is set to worsen as Russia is the biggest supplier of fertilizers. Sanctions imposed by Western nations would affect the harvest as well.
Ведь американцы, британцы, потом американцы, англосаксы, они ввели санкции на наши удобрения. Потом, осознав, что происходит, американцы сняли санкции, а европейцы нет. Сами вот в контактах со мной говорят, да, нужно подумать, нужно с этим что-то делать, а сегодня только усугубили эту ситуацию. Это будет ухудшать ситуацию на мировых рынках удобрений. А значит, и виды на урожай будут гораздо более скромными, значит, и цены будут идти только вверх. Вот и все. Это абсолютно недальновидное, ошибочное, я бы сказал, просто глупое.
Putin further blamed the European Union's alleged short-sighted policies for energy crisis across the Europe.
To about foreign policy joins me now. All right, KT, do you think the US and or NATO ships should escort Ukrainian grain tankers to help alleviate the food shortage?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any country with a navy, frankly, should help escort those grain tankers as well as other kinds of foodstuff commodity carriers out of the Ukrainian ports. This is not just about Ukraine. This is about the world. And Ukraine doesn't just export wheat, for example. It exports sunflower oil. Sunflower oil is a major ingredient in fast foods. It's a major ingredient in vegetable oil. We are looking within a few months at a major food shortage, probably not as much in the United States because we're very abundant with our farmlands and our agricultural industry, but around the world. It's going to hit the Middle East. It's going to hit Africa. There will be starvation. There will be mass exoduses. There will be refugees leaving these regions. So, yeah, I think we should escort them. I think other countries with a navy should escort them. And I wouldn't wait till the Russians start blockading ports. I'd start doing it now.
Would you say do it now, even though it may create a more intense situation with maybe US Navy ships going at it with Russian Navy ships? That is a possibility, isn't it?
But here, it's not just U.S. Navy ships. I would say, again, any country with a Navy who imports wheat and oils should be part of this flotilla, should be part of this convoy protection. Russia's not going to take on the entire world over this issue. And to do it, frankly, is a matter of deterrence. Now, are we going to risk being in the Black Sea where the Russians have said, no, this is ours, stay out? We've been in the Black Sea for years. So, no, I think that this is one place where, again, it's not just about Ukraine now. It's a humanitarian disaster that will be facing not just the region, not just Europe, but frankly, the whole world within 6 months.
Well, Katie, Joe Biden's Commerce Secretary, Gina Raimondo, she says the administration could soon relax tariffs on Chinese goods to combat soaring inflation here at home. Should we be doing this right now? Does it send the right message to China?
It doesn't send the right message. It tells them, go ahead and take advantage of us. But it also isn't going to solve inflation. The only thing that's going to really take a dent out of inflation is if President Biden lifts or pauses or halts his war against American fossil fuels. That's what's driving inflation. It's gasoline prices. It's diesel oil prices. It's the fact that petroleum is used in everything from cosmetics to clothing. Stop that war on fossil fuels, on American fossil fuels. You'll fix inflation so fast, but yet they won't do it.
He won't do it because he can't do it because the climate crowd won't let him. That's where we are. I think we are paying the price for their green dreams. Last word to you.
Now, this war that is unfolding in Ukraine is actually rewriting history and is paving the way for a new world order. Millions of people have been displaced and economic fallout due to this war continues without any solution in sight, like the food crisis that is looming across the world. Now, we're talking of a crisis, but many countries are already facing the ramifications of this food crisis that has been sparked by Russian invasion into Ukraine. Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin regarding this issue. He accepted that this issue exists, but he's refused to take the fault for it. Moscow blames this entire crisis on Western sanctions on Russia.
Poi io ho terminato dicendo che poi dovrò chiamare il Presidente Zelensky e vedere se c'è un'analoga disponibilità a procedere in questa direzione. È un'iniziativa che ho sentito il dovere di prendere per la gravità della crisi umanitaria che può toccare poi i più poveri del mondo. Speriamo. Ma a me interessa una questione più definita, più piccola, che è quella di cercare di vedere se si riescono a sbloccare questi enormi quantitativi di grano nei porti del Mar Nero, nei porti dell'Ucraina e del Mar Nero.
Now, this is how it is actually playing out. War in one country would affect trade and diplomacy globally unless you are the United States of America, which believes in hoarding, whether it be COVID-19 vaccines or food imports. But for the rest of the world, they are waiting for the crisis to in fact explode. Because Ukraine happens to be one of the largest exporters of wheat, corn, sunflower oil and also fertilizers. But with ports having been blocked, much of that flow to the rest of the world has been halted. Russia itself is a significant grain exporter, but this blockade is a form of a revenge. Putin is hitting back against the barrage of sanctions that have been imposed on Russia by the West. But this blame game is not going to help end the crisis. When the West imposes sanctions, it knew about the consequences that were to come with it. And this is just one amongst the consequences that is now hitting the rest of the world. So does that mean that the United States and its allies were not prepared with a plan B? Washington has said that food, fertilizer and seeds are exempted from sanctions, which is why there shouldn't be a shortage. But does the West expect Russia to be reasonable here? Did the United States really believe that Russia will send grains to the same countries that are inflicting financial losses on the nation? The World Trade Organization says that nearly about 25 million tons of grain are in Ukraine's storage, and another 25 million tons could be harvested by next month. European countries have tried to export the grains by rail, but trains can only carry a small fraction of what Ukraine produces. The truth is, ships are needed for the bulk of the exports, and that is only possible once the war ends. But with 3 months having been done the war and the 4th month ongoing, the uncertainty as to when this war will end and when will the food crisis that has been sparked by this war be eased are questions for which no one has an immediate answer. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.